Hello, I'm Chris Jablonski, Director of CXO Revolutionaries at Zscaler, and today we have the privilege and pleasure of speaking with Chris Dill, the Vice President and CIO of Kiewit Technology Group, leading more than 600 professionals responsible for technology planning, development, deployment, and support across Kiewit. He is also the chair of the Tech Nebraska Executive Committee. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you on the show. Kiewit, very interesting company. It's one of North America's largest and most respected construction and engineering organizations. Looks like you have roots that reach far all the way back to 1884. Can you tell us more about the company, and then we'll jump right into some of the IT issues and cybersecurity challenges facing it.
Yeah, you bet. Well, I appreciate you reading what is probably the public blurb that we put out there about Kiewit. What we do is we're really one of North America's largest general contractor engineering and construction companies, and we build large capital projects that and self-perform much of the work. And there's just a handful of companies really in North America that are capable of taking on projects like that, mega projects, industrial projects, water and wastewater. We do everything but residential and multifamily. And so we build stadiums, and we build dams and reservoirs, and you name it. We take on large, oftentimes $1 billion plus projects, and we're a Fortune 250 or so company, and as you said, been operating in North America for a long time. So a company with a lot of history and a lot of neat projects.
Those projects, are they fairly centered around the Midwest and Nebraska region, or are they pretty much nationwide?
We really operate from the Arctic Circle in northern Canada to into Mexico. So pretty much the breadth of North America.
Excellent. And you've been there, I think it was since 2013, is that right?
I'm about 12 years at Kiewit. That's right.
Excellent. Well, as the CIO, I'm sure you have a long list of initiatives and priorities, especially now with the advent of AI and all the other emerging technologies on your plate. But if you could sum up, say, in a 30,000-foot view of your IT and cybersecurity challenges, that could really help us frame the discussion and move into things like digital transformation and cybersecurity modernization at your company.
Yeah. On one hand, we're not dramatically different from most enterprises in terms of the things that we're faced with and dealing with and trying to do a good job of preventing and protecting against. What maybe makes construction and engineering unique is on a couple fronts. One is the industry is traditionally a laggard, did not embrace technology really until the last decade or so, again, broadly in the industry. And so, digital transformation, relatively new to most companies in the industry. Kiewit a little ahead of the curve. So you've got a maturity issue that I think you wouldn't be faced with if you're in financial services or retail or some of the industries that are maybe more mature and went through a digital transformation 2 or 3 decades ago. So I think that's one challenge, is educating our workforce, making sure they understand the risks and things that they need to watch out for in terms of vulnerabilities. The other thing that makes construction a little bit unique is we joint venture partner with lots of our competitors on projects. And so, your threat surface isn't just confined to the inside the 4 walls of your organization, but oftentimes you're also sort of taking on the risk of another organization that you're partnered with on a major project. Our projects are 2, 3, 4, 5 years in duration, oftentimes multiple billions of dollars in value. So it's like starting a $1 billion company from scratch every time. And oftentimes you're doing it in collaboration with another enterprise. So that introduces risk that's unique, somewhat unique maybe to construction and engineering. And so we spend a lot of time making sure that we're partnered with companies in the industry so that when we come together to execute work, we have similar approaches and we're thinking about those risks the same way so that we're keeping both organizations safe.
It's fascinating. It sounds like you come together with these partners and suppliers on a mega project for quite a while, right? It's not like a year or less, but it sounds like it could go up to 4 to 5 years and beyond. Is it a muscle that everybody in this ecosystem has developed in terms of coming together and then separating quickly and then setting up again later for the next project
Yeah, I would say,
digitally?
yeah,
Yeah.
certainly larger contractors. This is just a very traditional way of doing business. It's a way of sharing risk. It's a way of bringing expertise to a project that maybe you don't have inside of your organization, and they've been operating that way for a long, long time. What's different in the modern era is the digital side of this, right? The fact that each organization wants to bring their network, their technologies, their data, their devices to those projects. But in doing so, they bring their risk too, and maybe varying degrees of how well they are dealing with that risk. And so, yeah, it's kind of a natural way of operating in the industry. I would say we are evolving in terms of making it natural or more natural in terms of how we deal with the risk that comes with being in the digital age. And again, in an industry that's a laggard, not everybody's maybe as prepared as you'd like them to be, and that creates interesting negotiations. So,
Yeah. I look forward to figuring out how you're able to have the influence that you do in terms of pushing your organization forward against this backdrop of being, in a laggard industry, and maybe being a beacon for how the rest of it should evolve. But on that note, and one thing that led us to invite you to this podcast is the fact that you are pretty well entrenched in your state as a thought leader, right? You are on the chair of the Tech Nebraska Executive Committee. So Tech Nebraska sounds like it's an industry association, and I think you've been there for a couple years. So congratulations on your appointment there. What can you tell us about that before we, come back around and talk about risk and IT and et cetera?
yeah, I'll try to not let this dominate the rest of the discussion. In short, Nebraska as a state was one of maybe just a few that didn't have a tech association dedicated to technology. We have a manufacturing association and many others, but nothing focused on technology. And that became the importance of that became apparent in the last few years as more and more potential legislation was coming in front of what we call the unicameral in Nebraska, the legislative body, that were tech focused and tech related, and there was no voice in the state of Nebraska that could speak as an expert body to help shape those potential laws that were being contemplated. And so, for that reason, I helped start Tech Nebraska as an organization. I was in kind of at the ground level with a few other influential companies in the state, and in 2 years we've gotten this thing off the ground, and it's now a real and going concern, and an organization that has established some clout and some accreditation, if you will, in the state, and we're starting to be known as the voice of technology in Nebraska. And so, it's meant to be a binding agent for all technologists in the state of Nebraska, an association that brings everybody together, gives everybody a voice, gives us the chance to talk about the things that are important to the companies in the state, the people in technology in the state. How do we create the very best environment to be a technology organization or a technologist in the state of Nebraska, and then influence legislation accordingly so that our legislators are making good choices, not hindering Nebraska's ability to be flexible and innovative, but making smart additions to state law that will, protect people, protect data, and so forth. And so, in this last legislative session that is still ongoing, we've had the chance to speak and testify in front of the legislature. We've had a chance to work behind the scenes with some legislators on some bills that they were bringing forward that were tech focused. And I think we're starting to make a difference, and that's really the goal ultimately. So I'm excited about it. I'm honored to be the first chair of that organization, and I think it's got bright days ahead.
Appreciate that description. It's very helpful. I have one follow-up question there before we jump into some of the issues that Kiewit may be facing. Is the objective more toward workforce development, or is it more about critical infrastructure, or is it more just general digitalization across the industries, whether it's in engineering and building like yours or beyond, or is it a combination of all of it?
Yeah, our charter would let us flow into any of those areas that we thought were timely and important to, again, the overall development of the environment in Nebraska for a healthy tech ecosystem. I would say primarily it is focused on influencing policy. That is our bread and butter. There are other great organizations in Nebraska. There's an organization called the Nebraska Tech Collaborative that I'm involved in as a board member that is very focused on workforce development solutions, for instance. So Tech Nebraska partners with the Nebraska Tech Collaborative on workforce development. So maybe we're a bit, Tech Nebraska maybe a bit of an umbrella organization. We can kind of go in any direction that we think is timely and important to the overall good. But I would say policy influence is really probably our bread and butter. If you said, what's the one thing that organization needs to do really, really well? I would say that's it.
Thanks for that. Chris, let's now pivot over to cybersecurity. This wouldn't be a Zscaler podcast without touching on that topic for at least a little while. But you're using Zero Trust. How did you personally come across it, if you remember, and what convinced you that it could be the right framework for security at Kiewit?
Sure. Yeah, I don't know that I remember a moment when I first heard the term. I'm going to say, a few years ago, I remember starting to hear it at tech conferences and industry events, certainly in trade publications. It was probably a hype cycle phrase for a bit of time. You heard a lot about it. And then, like all things that go through the hype cycle, then it comes down, and you start talking about the realities and the practicalities of it, and what does it really mean to your organization. So it's probably been a couple of years since we reached that point where it was like, okay, how does this fit into our framework? What does it mean to us? What does it mean to our business? And how might it enable some of the things that we really need to get done as part of an organization? And I would say beyond just your typical just kind of cyber stance, right? Beyond just the blocking and tackling of, are we protecting the endpoints, and are we, are our systems patched, and all of those kinds of things? How do we make it a differentiator? And I think that's how we looked at Zero Trust, was how does that become an enabler for things that are going to be important to this company now and in the coming years? And so, a few of those motivations would be, things like, we do a fair amount of Department of Defense, Department of Energy type projects that require a heightened level of security and compliance than maybe we would otherwise take on as an organization. Compliance in general has really flowed into our industry. Again, a laggard in that way as well. There wasn't a heck of a lot of kind of legal hurdles you had to clear as a construction engineering company until the last decade or so. Unlike financial services or healthcare, that has changed. We now have lots of things that we have to stay in compliance with. And so I think, as I looked at the big picture and said, okay, we know that for our business to continue to thrive, for us to be positioned to bid on work that we think we're well suited to win and execute on, but we're going to have to be compliant in these areas. We're going to have to be able to prove that we can do what we say we can do, that we keep not only our infrastructure and data safe, but nobody's going to use us as a jumping off point to get into sensitive government systems or partner systems. I think Zero Trust made the list, a short list of things that we felt like, you know what, we're going to have to start going down that road because it's going to afford us the ability to say, yeah, we are compliant, rather than maybe doing it the old-fashioned way and probably end up being the more difficult way of piecing together kind of older strategies, if you will. It just felt like something that we needed to have on our list as a goal, as a architecture that would enable us as a company to go bid any and all work that we wanted to and be able to check those boxes and say, yep, we are compliant. We meet the requirements that a project like that would call for.
Got it. So it helps you with regulatory compliance, meeting standards, and as a result, you get more business. I mean, that's a great that's business enablement, in a nutshell. But if you were to turn the lens back inward and you're asked to say remove, hindrances to agility, remove cost while being more secure, is there anything in that department from the perspective of a CIO that you could talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think huh, that's a balancing act, right? I mean, in some cases, we've had to say, in order to be well positioned to go win that kind of work, um, we can't do it on the cheap. We're going to have to invest in technologies and solutions that are going to enable that. That, yeah, you don't kind of do that with duct tape and baling wire. And so, in some cases, we've had to say we're going to increase our investment, but the payoff is going to be there in the long run in terms of business enablement. On the other hand, we are a very pragmatic company, and we are a very pragmatic technology and cyber organization. And so we don't just run out and buy a one of everything and hope we can stitch it together. I don't think that's a winning strategy. We tend to partner with companies that we think will be truly additive to what we're trying to get done. We'll have very targeted solutions that will help us on that journey, and then wire it back into our greater infrastructure in a way that is kind of just enough without it being too much, without it being overkill. Because I think the balance to that is you can't paralyze your business either, right? And so we can't be a hindrance to productivity. We can't be the reason our folks can't get their job done either. And so that pragmatism of trying to balance those two things, I think, is really, really important. So we've spent money where we thought it was warranted and it would be a differentiator. We've been pragmatic and used what we already owned and incorporated it where we felt we could. And for us, that feels like the right approach. May not be right for every industry or every company, but it feels right for us. And I think, so far that has proven to be a good strategy.
When you think about or visualize the maturity curve of your zero trust architectures, like the implementation of it, so I'm picturing all these remote locations. I see Kiewit workers, all these different sites, and it's constantly changing. I'm not sure how many endpoints you're currently securing, but how would you describe or where are you at in that maturity? Do you feel like everything's pretty much covered by a ZTA, or you still have some branches or some OT, for example, that could still be covered down the road?
Yeah, I mean, I think our coverage is really good at this point. We've probably got, somewhere in the neighborhood of 50,000 endpoints, something like that. And I would say for those that we've identified as in scope and of sufficient kind of risk, we've largely got those kind of covered and under the umbrella, if you will. And I think for now we've done what we wanted to do. Probably like cyber more broadly, it's a journey that probably has no finish line, because things are constantly evolving. Our infrastructure is constantly evolving. The threats are constantly evolving. And so I don't know that there's a point where you go, hey, I don't think you spike the ball and declare victory at any point. But I think at a point in time right now, we feel pretty good about where we're at. Our overall maturity, I don't know. Maybe I'd call us 6.5 on a scale of 10, something like that. But I would also
Pretty good.
tell you, I don't think we aspire to be a 10. I don't think our business calls for that. I think, 8.5, and we'd probably say, hey, we're at the right place given our business, our industry, the requirements of our business to be competitive. We don't need to take it all the way to 10. We could, but I think the investment and the return on that investment, there's some point where it's diminishing returns. And so, yeah, I feel pretty good about where we are. I think we have a roadmap to go even further and continue to build this out and continue to mature. But we've come a long way in what I would call a relatively short time, call it a couple years. And maybe shameless plug, I do think Zscaler has been a differentiator for us. I was skeptical, quite frankly. I didn't think the market matched the hype in the zero trust realm for a long, long time. I do think Zscaler's been the partner that has helped us jump the curve in a pretty substantial way in the last couple of years. Feel great about that, and I think they're going to be a long-term partner for us. But maybe words of encouragement. Find yourself a partner like that, because I think there's a lot of folks a lot of organizations that say that they can do a lot of things, and many of them fell short in our eyes. So
Those are great words that our executive leadership would appreciate. So thank you for sharing. So you gave some numbers, in terms of the digital or IT milestones that need to get to a 9 or a 10 that are outside of, like what Zscaler would do. Is there anything you could share? Because, for us, interviewing a CIO is a treat, because for every one of you, we talked to about 10 networking or cybersecurity leaders, and it's just, we get a very different perspective. So for your industry, I can't imagine actually what is the emerging edge in terms of technology and how to make it help your business, whether it's like digital twins or moving
yeah.
everything into the cloud or self-driving vehicles for your entire fleet. Like what are we looking at here?
Yeah, you're stealing my talking points. I mean, yeah, you're thinking of it the right way. I think if our CEO came to me tomorrow and said, we need to be 10, universal coverage, every endpoint monitored, every endpoint authenticated in some way, you're talking about a fleet of 25,000 pieces of equipment, bulldozers, cranes, power plants, generators, scrapers, you name it, right? You're talking about more cameras and drones and things that I don't even know the number out on our 400 plus concurrent projects at any given time. You're talking about all of our cloud infrastructure. You're talking about traditional endpoints, laptops, mobile devices, um, you know, uh, on and on and on. I mean, um, IoT devices in the facilities that we're building, right? We do vertical building. All the systems that manage heating and cooling and all of those things are our responsibility until we hand the keys off to a customer, right? When we declare a project finished. The breadth of stuff is unbelievable, right? I don't know that it compares to like a hospital environment or something like that, but it is substantial in construction. And so, but you also then you get into but is it worth it, right? How big a threat is that bulldozer in terms of kind of a cyber threat, right? Well, it's not zero. But there's some things we can do to box that bulldozer in a little bit that makes it relatively low risk. Do we need to extend all of our best tooling to that? Probably not, right? So again, I think I hate to keep coming back to pragmatism, but I think that's how we constantly think about it is, where's the right place to apply our most advanced technologies and tooling, which also tend to be your most expensive technologies and tooling. And where do you get the most return for that? And then likewise, what are the things that maybe you can use a little more traditional means to box those things in and take the threat level down to a place where you can reasonably live with it. And that's our approach. So we're not trying to be 10. We're not spanning all those things that I rattled off. We think we have the most important ones identified, and appropriately covered, and everything else we assign kind of a threat level to it, if you will, put the right kind of tooling and monitoring against it. And for now, we feel pretty good about that.
Excellent. Sounds like you got a good grasp of the risk calculation, if you will, across your entire attack surface and IT assets, and you just find that balance. Maybe that just keeps moving around year by year, but you know where to intelligently place the investments and perhaps not waste money where it doesn't need to be, right?
I think so, but you said it. It's constantly evolving. So it's not going to be long before we have autonomous uh, machines on our projects, and those will be completely connected devices, completely connected units that will have a totally different, digital capability than our, human kind of operated bulldozers and cranes today, right? Um, that'll change that whole kind of threat equation for that equipment, and I think we'll probably have to have that in scope when that time comes, right? So yeah, I mean, again, I don't think there's a finish line, right? Maybe in IT generally, but certainly not in cyber. We're always going to be evaluating and reacting to what's happening both internally and externally, and you adjust accordingly, right? So
Absolutely. Well, it's a good capstone for that topic. I'm sure we could keep going. That kind of stuff fascinates me, particularly in the area I'm in, writing stories about what's coming next over at CXO Revolutionaries. But I did want to touch on one last subject, which is perhaps this triad of public sector, private, and vendor. And you might be in a unique position to just be able to give some insights because you're working with the public sector, given your leadership role at Tech Nebraska, and you're passionate about enhancing the tech ecosystem in Nebraska, right? So
yeah,
State Ramp, which I know Nebraska is a member of, is a program that helps companies like yours and public sector organizations to make decisions perhaps more rapidly, right, from a long list of options. Now, how does State Ramp, from your vantage point, help improve the security of government agencies that may be sharing data with you or on the same projects if if they're the customer for perhaps some of your big mega projects? How does all that look from your point of view, and what could be done at the state and local level to make
yeah.
it better?
Well, what I think those efforts provide us as a contractor, a vendor to government agencies is some level of certainty, and maybe a common language to speak with those agencies that was certainly lacking in the past. Even in my 12 years at Kiewit, um, if you talk to the Corps of Engineers, they talked a completely different language and had a completely different set of expectations than the State Department of Roads, for instance, right? I think what these efforts of late are going to are and will help with is providing more of a common framework of expectations of, you know, maybe minimum requirements of common language, so that when we all get around the table and talk about a project that one of those agencies would like to build, especially if it's in a sensitive space, that we're not starting from zero every time and trying to understand each other, and can we arrive at some common ground and common terminology, and that made our work, I think, really really hard a decade ago, and I think it is slowly getting better. um, Now there's a long way to go too. um, you know, things like FedRAMP, things like CMMC are still not always clear in their language and expectations. And so I think even just figuring out, are you compliant with those things, sometimes can be challenging. But I do think progress is being made in just, does everybody have kind of a standard way of thinking about it, talking about it, so that we all can jump the conversation forward, if you will, and get to the business of what are we actually trying to build, rather than spending a whole bunch of time debating sort of foundational things that just take up time and keep us from getting to the business at hand. So I think, take the guesswork out of it, give everybody a common set of expectations, common set of language, and to the extent that we can do that, now everybody has a better chance to succeed. I think in some small part it's symptomatic of why public works kind of projects just consistently went over budget, over schedule. It was these kinds of things that bogged that down. And
Mhm.
so I think these efforts are important to try to find commonality so that we all don't spend all the time on that stuff. We spend it on how we're going to build your project successfully and on budget and on time, and so the taxpayers get what they are actually asking for. So I don't know. I mean, I hope I answered your question, but that's how I think of it. I just think it's an opportunity to get those constituents to the table and talk about, for the greater good, let's get to some common understanding so that we could that becomes table stakes and we can really focus on the stuff that matters.
Would you say that common understanding is achieved in part through this realization that there is critical infrastructure involved, perhaps on some of these projects? There is a lot of data. There is the potential. For example, I've read about several waste and wastewater management, or water and wastewater management, getting compromised, in their
Yeah.
controls in some states. Do you think that could be a forcing function? I mean, you don't want to have an attack be the thing that gets everybody to the table and make a decision faster about
Right.
modernization. But it seems like without something critical happening, sometimes nothing else really moves things forward, right?
Yeah, sadly, I think that's often the case, and you're also dealing with agencies that, in some cases, just don't have the resources to have applied to these things, right? And so they're working off our archaic information systems, data, just simply because they didn't have anything to invest in those things to modernize. And so I think that too, in time, will become a real benefit to these kinds of efforts. Is bringing everybody up, hopefully, to a watermark where you go, okay, at least we can count on a level of sort of maturity, so that we're not trying to pull them into sort of the modern age, if you will. And we're at a even if we're at a 6 or 7, they're at a 2, and
Mhm.
we're just talking two completely different languages. Yet contractually, oftentimes, the requirements, because some consultant wrote it, is at a 9, right? Um, our gap to get there may not be too terribly much, but the gap for our customer to get there can be absolutely enormous. And so I think that too, if we can get everybody to kind of a watermark, a recognition that we've all got to at least be to this point. Um, and then things like data, hey, quality data matters. You want your project built on time and on budget. You got to play that game with us. We've got to have good data to operate from, and you're going to want good data back, right? Because you're going to manage, as a DOT, you're going to manage a portfolio of projects every year, right? So I think industry being able to influence government in that way is as important, at least, as government influencing industry as we talk about these efforts. And I think if both sides come to it with that mindset, hey, we're going to get better together, then we've got a chance.
Absolutely. And that's what whole of state is all about, right? We've been speaking to many public sector security, cyber executives, and it's pretty much very similar to your sentiments in terms of you got to come to the table. It will take some time, find efficiencies, prioritize, and hopefully we transform, in lockstep together.
Yeah.
So I got, unless you have any further uh, tidbits on that point, I got a closing question, and then we could wrap it up. How does that
Sure.
sound?
You bet.
So, what legacy do you hope to leave behind, in your community, for your company and industry? I mean, you still have a long ways to go in your career, uh, but down the road, probably going to want to take up golfing, perhaps full time, and and you want to be remembered. What would that be in your case?
Yeah, I've got a few years to go. Yeah, I hope to play more golf too one of these days. But in the meantime, I like how you put it, because there's different kind of areas that you hope to influence. I think from a company perspective, I just need to leave Kiewit in the very best position that I can, to react to whatever comes in our industry, right? I need to have our digital strategy, our infrastructure, our cyber posture, all of those things just need to be as good as they can be, but also as nimble and flexible as they can be, just to react to whatever comes, whether that's autonomous machines, or that's AI, or that's, we get into entirely different markets. Nuclear is kind of quietly making a comeback right now, right? And we got lots of things in the hopper. 3 years ago, we weren't the least bit worried about nuclear. Now we are, right? So that brings a whole host of things. I think my job is to just leave Kiewit in a position to be able to react to any of those things that present themselves as opportunities or risks. And if I leave an infrastructure and a posture that enables the company to pretty quickly pivot and take advantage of those things, and position Kiewit to be opportunistic, then I think I've done my job there. Community, we talked about Tech Nebraska. I hope I can influence in some way the state of Nebraska to just be positioned to be the absolute best we can be. Are we going to be, San Jose? Probably not. I don't even know that that's what we should aspire to be, but we can be a state where it is a fantastic environment to be a technologist, or be a company that's serious about technology. We can shape policy so that our state supports and enables those efforts rather than works against them or hinders them through state law. That's my goal there, and I hope I can have a little bit of influence there in a positive way. And then industry, I just want to try to help or enable Kiewit to continue to be a leader. Our company leaders had the foresight to take on technology and digitization probably 5 years before just about anybody else in the industry did. So we've got a bit of a head start and a bit of an advantage. I'd like to the extent that I can contribute to the industry and help bring others up through that curve, I'll do it, because, as I mentioned, our competitor today is our partner tomorrow. That ecosystem of joint venture means that it's a risk to us if our partner on a job is lagging us by many, many years in technical maturity. And so to the extent that I can help others kind of, if we can raise all boats, if you will, now not give away Kiewit's secret sauce, but if we can help everybody come up, from a maturity perspective, that's part of my job to do that. So yeah, that you made me stop and think a little with that question. It's a great question, and I guess that's how I feel about each of those areas. So
I appreciate the thoughtful response. Pretty noble what you have your aspirations set on. So thank you very much, Chris, for joining us on the CXO Voices podcast today.
Chris, I appreciate you having me. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Today we've had Chris Dill, Vice President and CIO of Kiewit, on the show. Please subscribe to CXO Revolutionaries podcast on your favorite player. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Have a great day.